Welcome back to your favorite comedy finance channel. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. So today I wanted to go over some math the Fed has been doing, and I think they're on meth. So we're going to be going over a lot of different data points that have been coming out over the last couple weeks. And shout out to everybody on ODAP. I'm going to just go ahead and just populate the link in here real quick, and then we'll share it over to Twitter and all that stuff. But I do want to begin by saying, the current PCE right now is 3.1%, okay? And then when you remove the food and energy, we're sitting at 2.8%, and the government so far has been saying, oh, well, we're gonna be going, inflation's gonna somehow go down to 2% by 2027. I was taking a look at some of the projections between the Fed and what some of the other people are saying. Some people are saying that expected inflation reports are probably going to be somewhere in the vicinity of 3.8% over the next 5 years. Jerome just got through saying that he expects us to be back at 2% by 2027, and I have no idea the type of math he's doing or how we're going to get there when right now the debt ceiling or the debt deficit, however you want to look at it, is at $36.1 trillion. So if inflation is 2.8% at the best case, then that means that we're ballooning this supply of money well over 40 trillion in the short term. So if the supply of the US dollar is going to be ballooning north of $40 trillion, how the fuck are we going to get to 2% inflation? I think we have a higher probability of seeing seeing the inflation target run to 3% versus us ever seeing 2% ever again. Now, I do think it's funny that they take away the data points from food and energy, considering that's the majority of what everybody buys, right? One thing I do want to touch base on is just the different market asset classes out there, whether you're looking at like gold or silver, or you're looking at real estate and all that stuff. And I do want to, emphasize what I was talking about on my last stream is a lot of people right now, and this is considering if you're anywhere between 40, 50 years old and younger, okay, you were born on time, for an asset class early enough for you to be here, okay? If you think about it, the stock market's hundreds of years old, okay? The crypto market's roughly how many years old? Maybe, less than 20 years old. So, you really think about, the type of time frame it takes for an asset class to really appreciate and value. The stock market's worth about $70 trillion, and we're talking about the tokenization of the stock market, tokenization of ETFs and all sorts of things, right? Including real estate. So, if you really think about what the crypto market will eventually become, you're talking about well over $3 trillion, right? You're talking about well over 10 or 20 or 50 trillion dollars. So there's a lot of growth to be had, and we still have a lot of growth to be going through from here going forward. I do want to say that, I'm still focused on these picks, okay, guys? I'm still focused on PokerStarter Polls, POLS. I'm still focused on Stater SD. I'm still focused on DIA, okay? And ArcBlock ABT, Dragon Chain, and also the React token, okay? I'm focused on those coins. Now, that's not to say a lot of these other coins are not good coins that, like, for instance, like some people brought up NCT the other day, and they were like, but Dion, is this a bad pick now? And I'm like, no, it's not. I've never said it was a bad pick. If something's a bad pick, I'll say it's a bad pick. Just because I stopped talking about something doesn't mean that it's instantly never going to work out for that project. Because keep in mind, the project is a idea or a company that is going to either succeed or fail based on whatever those the CEO or that staff team is going to do. But based on what we see them doing today, if they're building, if they're still responsive on Twitter, they're still posting, they're active, then you can imagine they're still going to do they're still going to grow over time. But you know, NCT Polyswarm is still a very good pick for me. I still like it. I think if you are a shrimp, it is a very good pick to have. I think it's only $2,000 just to get 100K tokens of that. That's a good deal. React token is also a good one. That's on crypto.com, gate.io, and KuCoin. And that only costs you, I think, $75 or $8,000 right now for 100K tokens. It's not bad. Now, I do want to emphasize the fact that, you know, if you take a look at all the Mickey Mouses that pretended to be your friend on the internet, you know, they're no longer here. They're gone. You know, and if you really, if you take a look at a lot of those calls, a lot of their picks, they're all damn near zero, or they're well below market value what they should, or what they were calling them at. Okay, and this, and I do want to go back to this point that I'm making, where, you know, you have to know when to pivot, and you have to know when you have to say something's wrong. Okay. And, you know, I want to use the example of Arrow, because Arrow is like a very good pick, and I still think it's a good pick. It's a good project. Nothing wrong with it. It's not saying I'm not saying it's a scam or anything, but, you know, it's a good example, because I warned everybody at the top. You know, it ran to $2. We did I think about 20x on that coin, and I told people, hey, you know, I know it's a good project. I know it's really good, but we need to get out of this, before the tokenomics start reflecting in the price. And a lot of people, you know, talk shit on me, or they didn't want to listen to what I was saying, you know, or you know, they took it offensively, and because they took it offensively, they started talking shit about my other picks, or, you know, whatever the case. But look where Arrow is now. It's at 40 cents, and it's still a bad deal. And the reason why it's still a bad deal is because it's still overpriced based on its new tokenomics. So, you know, I keep telling people, it's not about how popular something is, or it doesn't matter the type of audience number that people have. It doesn't matter who they are, or who they think they are, who they say they are. You know, nobody is popular enough to hold up a market, or hold up when it's time to pivot, or when it's time to sell, when there's something wrong. Okay, or when the environment in which you're going to hold a token changes. Because if the tokenomics change, it's time to deviate your strategy. Okay, so, you know, Arrow is a good example. I told a lot of people to get out of that really early at the top. Another good example would be like LCX or Math Token, or shout out to Brian the Nichols on Turbo. Turbo is damn near zero. So, you know, that's another thing. It's like, you know, good picks are good picks because they're good projects, or they actually have a sustainable business model that'll last through the shake, or through the chop of the market, right? You're gonna see some picks, you know, go through some shake, but more or less you're gonna see them stay up at a decent valuation, and they'll go through cycles on cycles, and they'll be okay. But you don't typically see a good pick go damn near zero. Okay. So, you know, when you're taking a look at some of these other picks out there, you have to really think about it. You know, when you're doing pivots, or when you're changing around, you really want to pick something that's going to hedge, or you're starting a new slate. Whenever, like for instance, whenever I make a new call, I don't make calls because, you know, I'm scheduled to make a call, because, you know, this is a brand new week. You know, this is the first week of the month, so, you know, I got to make a new call. This is the second week, I got to make another call. Like, I'm not on a schedule to make calls, and the reason why is because that leaves you guys vulnerable. That's going to leave you guys getting wrecked or rinsed. And when you have somebody, you know, making you jump around a lot, or if you are constantly in movement, or your investing schedule is exciting in any sort of way, you're probably getting rinsed out. You're probably in some sort of fashion getting rinsed out by the constant shifting around. So for me, whenever I make a call, it's for a reason, or I make a call because it's at a very good bottom, or it's going to hedge for what I anticipate is coming later. So whenever I'm doing that, like for instance, when I called polls, I called it, I think it was at 23 or 24 cents, and it's been bouncing around that same level. It did a 2x at call, but like it kind of stabilized around the same call level. But that's the point. The point in making the call is not to see the instant growth or instant gratification at that time. It's to project what the growth will be later on. It's to be there on time. So, just because something's not moving right now doesn't mean anything. If you're actually a real caller, okay, put it this way, if you're just somebody that pumps and dumps tokens, right? The only time or only time you could pump a coin is when you call it, right? So it's just pump dumps. So that's not really a call. That's just a pump and dump. That's not a call. A call is, I called this ahead of time. We parked our money here, and a year later, or 6 months in advance, or whatever the case, in advance, we were there before the surge. Okay? Before people liked Arc Block, or before people realized how great it is, or understood, how valuable it really is, we were there. Okay, and that's the point. You want to be there before people recognize the value of that project. That's how you make money as an investor. Full send on Dia, absolutely, sir, absolutely. But yeah, it's a very good time to be buying crypto right now. I'm very excited, like, as we go forward, because it's like right now, there's a lot of different signals still going off. When you're seeing gold go over $3,100, and the fact that it's stabilized above 3,000, and now it's over 3,100, it's probably not going to go under 3,000 anymore. So like now, when it's going over 3,100, and everyone's anticipating it to go higher, you're already hearing, if bankers or central banks are collecting gold, or they're already anticipating that gold's going to go up in value, then they're basically saying, hey, we're anticipating a depreciation in the dollar, or we're anticipating inflation. We're anticipating inflation. And back in 2020, I remember I spoke to you guys about the BIS report, where they were instructing central banks to start collecting gold up until 2028. So I said, even though we would have a bull market between 2020 going forward to 2028, we would have that large business cycle. But overall, this is a very large bracket to project what is going to happen with inflation, because that's the only reason why they would instruct the banks to collect up into that certain year, because they were anticipating that type of inflation. And not to mention what they're doing with regulations right now too. If you're already watching, liquidity start to vanish, it's starting to mean something. Now, going back to what the PCE report was, okay? Going back to some of the financial reports that we were going over earlier, I was taking a look at it, and I uploaded it on OddApp for you guys. And if you guys aren't on OddApp, it's available on Apple and Google stores. I did see that, personal income went up. Personal income is going up, but for whatever reason, spending is going down. So, consumer confidence is obviously dwindling. So, obviously, the ring of recession is starting to make its rounds all around. And if you take a look at all these markets all around us anyways, everything is overinflated or overpriced. And really, it's a generational thing. You think about it. It really is a generational thing. And that's kind of what's sad about, and I was just talking to my brother about this recently. where, you know, and this is kind of something that grinds my gears a little bit in general. For a lot of us that are, you know, 20s, 30s, and 40s, you know, like in that range, a lot of you guys didn't get your fair shake in real estate. Even now, for the people that can afford, you know, to go and buy a home, or, you know, go and do this or go do that, you're still not getting the best deal you could possibly get, because the boomers were the ones that got the best deals back in the day. And, you know, thankfully, you know, for some people, you know, maybe their father or their mother were part of that boomer generation where they were able to acquire real estate for cheap, or they were able to get get a leg up on that wealth to pass on to them, so that way they can have a footstool ahead of the curve. But a lot of people don't have that generational wealth transfer from one generation to the next. Some people got to start from the bottom up, right? So, you know, speaking on top of this, the whole point of what I'm saying is, like, the markets that we're looking at now compared to what the crypto market is, you're watching all these dinosaur markets look unattractive to everybody. And it is unattractive to everybody because it's overpriced. The rates are high as shit. They're 7%. Like, you really think about, like, put it this way, back in the day, even 7% was a good rate, okay? Back in the day. You know, 1-2% was like a gift from God, okay? But even that, you know, even when you're talking about 5 or 6%, and you put that on 100 grand or 200 grand, 300 grand, even if you were to push that on a 15-year mortgage, you're still paying a fuckload of money on top of your principal of that asset, okay? And granted, you know, even if you were to owe that little of money on a home, okay, even if it's worth more money than that, still, you know, there's still loss of value because of how much money you had to pay for it to begin with anyways. So the wealth transfer is happening, but the wealth transfer is happening in opposite direction when it comes to buying shit in these markets, because you're talking about generations and generations and generations worth of stacks on top of these markets. Okay? So think about it. Everyone that's barely getting into the stock market today, they're getting in 400 years late. Think about that. They're getting in 400 years late, $70 trillion later. The probability of them actually being successful, or how much time it takes for them to be successful, takes longer. So that's why crypto is such a generational opportunity for so many of you, because we never got the chance to, because we weren't born soon enough for a lot of these other capital markets. We're here soon enough for that generational wealth where you could still make a lot of money early. And for those of you that have been here with me for a couple cycles now, you've already seen the 6 or 7 figure plays. You guys have already seen the money been made, okay? And what's silly about a lot of people is they make their first million in crypto, and they think it's over. They say, all right, well, I finally made my $1 million. And they think that this is the final finish line, and there's never going to be a finish line. You know, you're going to see at some point that when you make your $1 million mark and you're like very happy, you're proud, and that's cool, right? You're still going to get to this point where you're saying, well, fuck, this is so great, but you know what? Well, look at this shit I got to pay now. I got to pay this bill. I got to pay this. I got to pay that. And the talent of your investing skills starts to become also the reason why you need to invest more. So, you know, especially when you're a successful investor, it develops more of a need to invest, okay? So, you know, don't ever feel like, you know, you're not doing enough, or whatever the case. It's to create a portfolio. It's a life type of scenario. It's like a lifestyle, you know. For instance, you know, 401ks used to be, you know, the go-to for investments, and it would take somebody 40, 50 years in order to make an okay amount of money, which was not a lot of money. I mean, some people would invest a lot, like 40 years of their time into a 401k, and they would get out with only $400 or $500,000. Really think about that. So for those of you that have been with me enough to see this type of money already, and imagine, because a lot of us have did this 1-2 years, right? So imagine so many other people that spent this lifestyle building 401s, you know, taking 40 years to stack up 500K or $1 million bucks. See what I'm saying? And then be so fucking old they can't do shit with it, really. You know what I mean? So, again, this is still a good opportunity for you to get in. And, there's always going to be more opportunities as we go forward. And I'm going to call them as I see them if the opportunity presents itself. And it just depends on the entry too, guys. And I keep telling you guys this a lot. A lot of people come up to me and they say, oh, Dion, I have a good pick for you. I have something that you should take a look at. And, you guys really think that you have like the sauce, you like that you have the idea of what I like. And you guys are so off every time. Tokenomics is important, but entry is also important. You can't have tokenomics is not the forefront of importance without entry. Okay? If the cap is large, then the decimals need to be the entry. If the cap is small, then dollar or less is okay for entry. Okay? It just depends on where you're at. Okay? It's about the entry, the ratio between the two. It's tokenomics versus entry every time. And of course, multipliers are always going to matter, but there's different strategies for everybody based on where you're at. Okay, I do always want to go over some of these basic things that I would like you guys to know, because at the end of the day, like, I know influencers, their mission is to make you dependent on them because they want you to be. So MYC's mission has always been to make you independent. That's the biggest difference between MYC and everybody else. Because in other places, it's all about whoever this person's name is. In MYC, it's about whatever MYC could do for you as an individual. And whatever I could do for you, whatever I could educate you on, so that way you know what you're doing out there on the field with or without me, right? Because what if you do see something, And you got to know these things, so that way you know what you're doing. Because I know everyone is always going to talk to other people or share different picks, or, they're going to explore different places or whatever the case. Well, so if I know that, then obviously I want to arm you with the right data so you're not going out and getting rugged somewhere, or I want to warn you about certain protocols, like, staking, or, what to look for in those types of protocols, or what to look for when it comes to tokenomics or entries, or how to save yourself money, or how not to fucking get rugged, or how not to get your money stolen. There's a lot of different things that you guys got to be taking a look at besides just what picks are out there. There are a lot of good picks out there, but my goal is for me personally, is to get some explosive calls out there, but to make sure that if it is a call, we're going in and it's something that is very minimal, where we could get in at the very bottom and it's not a big deal, regardless of what market sentiment is, regardless of where the market is in general. Because if you guys think about it, this has been going on for about 3-4 months now, this chop. Okay, we were at 109 Bitcoin, right? We're at 109, and we saw a lot of chop between now and then. And if you take a look at our picks, some money has been made from a call bottom to up, but we've all stayed above call. And that's the point, because no matter what the market did, we were still owning the bottom. We were still hedged. And that's the point, because you want to protect your portfolio, rain or shine. Because some people see what here's what sucks about a lot of people. Sometimes like people will be like, will do really well. They'll make a lot of money or whatever. But the problem is when shit hits the fan, they lose it all. Okay, so sometimes you could have that big nice incline, but your decline is even harder because you didn't prepare yourself, or you didn't pivot right, or you didn't cut the cord on certain things at the right time, or you didn't de-risk enough, or whatever the case. Okay, but that's why I make sure that it's like, all right, here's where we're at. This is where your bottom is, and then you take a look at your chart. You go further back. It's not so much of how much upside we have. It's also about how much downside we're more than likely to avoid. And that's the point. And I think that a lot of you guys should appreciate that, because it's, obviously MYC has proven the upside for you. But, I think MYC shines the hardest, not only during the bear markets, but also during the choppy points in the market where we do see that downside, or we do see that chop. But while everybody's snorkeling, we see that hedging that we're going through right now. We're actually showing that our portfolios are maintaining their values. They're not losing by 60 or 80%. You're seeing minimal devaluation even during these heavier chopping periods of the market, and that's the point. And now, even with what we've had today, we're above calls and we're still able to stack at very good prices and get ready for the next wave up. And the next wave is coming. Because if you think about what we were just talking about, okay, even if Jerome is sincere, which I doubt he is, I don't know if he's, clearly maybe he's just showing face, but obviously we're not going to get to the 2% range. So, the way I see it is, regardless of what we do here, as we move forward, inflation is going to get hotter. And there's no reason to cut rates. We're at 2.8%, 3.1 with all the numbers in. Okay, so there's no reason for us to cut. Inflation is not getting lighter on us. It's still hot. So if anything, we should be hiking rates, but we're not. Jerome said we still need to cut rates in 2025. So if inflation's already hot and we cut rates twice or more, then obviously inflation is going to get a lot hotter. Not to mention, if inflation is at 3% and your debt is at 36.1 trillion, okay, then your monetary system with interest is going to be getting towards that 40 trillion mark, and that's not to mention a lot of this rollover that's going to end up happening. So, I do think that a lot of the numbers that you're looking at right now, although some people might view them like, oh man, the market doesn't look too good right now. The market actually looks very good. It looks very coiled up and suppressed, because with the dollar sitting at 104 exchange rate for your assets right now, you can imagine what is going to happen when the dollar starts crashing. And it's going to start crashing. I don't know if you guys noticed, but recently Japan, China, and Russia decided to jointly respond to the tariffs that are going to be coming on the 2nd. And tariffs are going to be a big reason as to why these foreign governments are dumping their bonds, and for good reason too. And this goes back to the PCE again, where if inflation's already at 3.1%, and we're anticipating it to go to 3.8%, and we're heading north of 4%, bond yields are already 4%, then where's the yield for these bondholders? Where are they going to really get any of this money? And let's say, even if we were to stay at 3% range, these bondholders are obviously, they have to be at least as smart as me. So they obviously know that the monetary supply is about to balloon to 40 trillion or more. So obviously, the principal in which they hold US dollar debt will go down, and their yield is going to barely, if at all, supersede the yield generation of their bonds. So they're more than likely to dump in response to these tariffs, just like Canada did. And for good reason, too. And they should, to be honest. Why wouldn't anybody take this trade? See, that's the thing. See, it is a very good trade. If me, you, and two other guys were here, and all of us are holding the same token, and, let's say we're all waiting on a snapshot or something, right? Let's say we're all waiting on a snapshot. So what we do is we hold these tokens until a specific date. We get the snapshot, and when that's happening, the price goes up or whatever. But anyways, on this particular day, the price is at the max that it could possibly go to, and all four of us know that this is the Pico top. This is the top price. And we know after this snapshot, the total supply of tokens is about to increase by 2x. Okay? So if all four of us know that the supply of tokens is about to 2x, and this is the max value we could get on half the supply, then this is probably the best time to sell on this date, or maybe a day before, or whatever. All of us are going to know that whoever sells the fastest is going to extract the most value out of that token, right? So what do you think Russia, China, and Japan are fucking doing? They're counting how much money they're going to make. And Japan has the most money to be made. I mean, their exchange rate is 150 yen to $1. So, they could make the most multipliers out of their exchange rate. So they're more than likely to be the first, if not the last. I mean, I don't know if these countries are exactly fair to each other when they speak to each other. I don't know if they go to a little Teletubby room or something and they're like, well, since you're holding the most US dollar debt, you should be the last to sell. I don't know in what world this would happen, but I don't know how these countries work. But, this is a Caesar moment about to happen. And it's very plain as day to me. And I've literally have seen this since 2020. I was calling on it very, very harshly in 2022 because it was even more apparent at that time as to what was going to end up happening, that we were going to end up having a bond crisis. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I thought in my mind that, the only way a bond crisis is going to end up happening is if inflation supersedes the yield of bonds, and that forces bondholders to dump the bonds, which makes sense because we just printed $2 trillion. Inflation is probably going to rip, so this is probably going to be the catalyst for all that stuff. And, Trump gets into office, and the first thing we start hearing about is these tariffs. And then I was like, oh, okay. So this is their angle. So the angle is the tariffs, and that tariffs are going to make them dump bonds. So it doesn't matter what the reason is. The point of the matter is they're going to be dumping bonds, which means that there's going to be more circulation of dollars entering the system soon. And you have to really look at where we're at right now. We're at 104 right now. A $104 exchange rate tells you that everyone is hoarding dollars. A 104 exchange rate is telling you right now that there's a dollar shortage, there's dollar scarcity in the market, that everyone's holding the dollar. It's showing you that there's scarcity. But look at all of these signals that something is about to happen where they're about to dump massive amounts of supply into the system. And it doesn't need printing. It doesn't have to be printing like everybody thinks. It doesn't need to be. It could just simply be these bondholders dumping their bonds because they're holding a fuckload of it. They're holding literally hundreds of billions. Okay? Now, you guys saw, and just to put this into perspective for you, You guys saw the effects of what $2 trillion worth of a print would do, right? You guys saw that. You guys saw what would happen to the market with 2 trillion added to the supply. Okay, you already saw that. Japan holds 1 trillion by itself, and then you have these other countries that are north of 800 billion, 900 billion. You know, if all of them together start dumping their bonds and it adds up to 2 trillion or $3 trillion worth of dollar supply, you can imagine that we're going to see this dollar go down to roughly, I still feel like we will see a 68, 70 cent dollar. And the growth in your assets are going to be reflected in that in your margins, and that's where the growth is going to come from. I don't think the growth is going to come from retail because retail is too broke. I think the economy is in recession already. I think everybody is hurting. And granted, guys, look, I know a lot of us are successful. I know a lot of you guys make good money. I know some of you have very good jobs. A lot of you have built wealth over the years and whatever. Okay, I know I've seen it. I'm here. Okay, but you aren't taking into account that 90% of this country does not have even 5 or 10 grand in the bank saved. Okay, you know, and for a lot of my boys out there, that have generations here, there's a lot of people here that they didn't have mom and dad, to leave them $1 million when they died, or they didn't have fucking 12 houses to leave behind when they died. See what I'm saying? You know, a lot of people, especially, considering how much immigration has happened too, a lot of people in this generation, and not accounting for all the fucking fatherless homes out there from all this bullshit we live in, a lot of poverty is out there. And even the people that do okay don't even have 10 grand saved. So we're very close to a crisis. We're really a bad fucking day away from a crisis at any point. So, you have to take in consideration a lot of the things that are going on. And this is what I was talking to my brother about the other day, where, we see let me see here. One sec. Just want to check something. Close to a crisis. I want to make sure I didn't get cut off here. All right. Can you guys hear me? I just want to make sure this didn't cut off on me. Glitching? Okay. Of course, it's when I start talking about some of the manipulation going on.